Last weekend saw Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko win a fifth successive term in office. That was to be expected from a man often called Europe's last dictator. What was less expected was that in the wake of the vote, the EU said it was likely to lift some sanctions on Belarus and on Lukashenko himself. Here on today's press review, we'll look at the reaction to Lukashenko's victory from the Financial Times. The paper starts by wondering why opposition to Lukashenko this time around was so muted. The answer is twofold. The first reason is because of effective repression from the state. But that's not all. The paper writes there was also the Ukraine effect. Russia's military interventions in Crimea and East Ukraine after last year's overthrow of President Viktor Yanukovych left many, even opposition-minded Belarusians fearing the consequences of unrest or regime change. Better a homegrown and professedly patriotic autocrat runs the calculus than Russian tanks. So Lukashenko enjoyed victory partly because many Belarusians see him as an effective bulwark against Russia. But at the same time, Moscow has been one of the Belarusian strongman's main backers over the years. As the FT points out, there is a paradox here. Mr. Lukashenko's long reliance on Russian financial backing and failure to wean the Belarusian economy off that dependence have made him an instrument of Moscow's influence. His re-election makes Belarus likely to succumb to pressure from Moscow to play host to a Russian airbase. The FT goes on to warn that if Russia does get that airbase in Belarus, then not only will that play badly domestically, but it will also have potentially serious repercussions abroad. The paper writes, that is not only unpopular with many Belarusians, it is of deep concern to the West. A Russian base in Belarus, which borders 3 NATO states and Ukraine, will enable an increasingly belligerent Moscow to project military power once again into Europe's very heart and might eventually house nuclear weapons. Given all of this, the newspaper thinks that European leaders who have voiced plans to lift sanctions on Lukashenko are misguided. The paper says such a step risks looking premature. It would send a message to Mr. Lukashenko and to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, that they can outlast Western sanctions, whatever their misdemeanors. And the Belarusian leader has an even worse domestic record than Mr. Putin. He has imprisoned multiple opponents, relies on a secret police still called the KGB, and appears to be grooming his 11-year-old son for a dynastic succession. It would seem then that the West must be careful before relaxing its stance too much toward Belarusian President Lukashenko, or it risks sending the wrong message to others, including Russian President Putin. The FT recommends that instead of lifting sanctions, the EU should target ordinary citizens and civil society, and thus give Belarusians a constant reminder that an alternative exists to corrupt post-Soviet authoritarianism. That's all we have time for today. Join us again tomorrow for another press review. In Kiev, this is Ukraine Today.